Greetings, my name is Mr. Good and Kinky. In this video, I am going to talk about the idea of free will versus predestination. I realize that a lot of Christians cling to this idea of free will because they can't imagine in a sense, the alternative is your puppets on a string to your God. However, if you believe that your God is all-knowing, then the idea of free will is actually nothing but an illusion that you would have. That the ultimate outcome, this God would have already known because it's all-knowing. The idea of all-knowing seems to be a problem for a lot of Christians. The thing is, in this I'm going to primarily focus on the aspect of predestination because the all-knowing factor, to pretty much, if this God would exist, would completely piss all over the idea of free will. Not to mention, the word free will doesn't appear once in the New Testament. It occurs, I think it's 17 times in the Old Testament, and 16 of those 17 times, it is always followed by the same word. Offering. It has nothing to do with you making a free will choice. It is all about the goodies this God is going to get. However, even though the word free will doesn't appear in the New Testament, neither does the word rapture, neither does the word Trinity, but that doesn't stop Christians. Their church saying something, to them, that's all the proof they need. They don't have to read their own Bible because they go by what their church tells them. Which makes me start to wonder if what a lot of Christians are worshiping isn't their God, but is actually their church. But that's a bit of a side note. In this, there's 3 places that I am going to be quoting from, because if they're true, then it completely destroys the idea of free will. Because this is all about predestination. Romans chapter 9 verses 21 to 23. Hath not the potter power over the clay of the same lump to make one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor? Verse 22. What if God, willing to show his wrath and make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath fitted to destruction? Verse 23. That he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had afore prepared unto glory. Now let's stop and think about this. Just the fact that this God would create some for heaven, some for hell, some for glory, some for damnation, means you're screwed from the word go. Because if this God made you for damnation or destruction or whatever the hell aspect, then how can you be anything but what this God made you to be? Much like the Judas figure in the Bible. Because if you go by the idea that Judas betrayed Jesus and brought about this crucifixion and this idea Judas is in hell, well, then Judas is being punished for doing the very thing he was supposed to do in the first place. Because if this Judas was intended to betray this Jesus, that would be the way that the crucifixion would come about, then him fulfilling what he was supposed to do, he's damned for it? Yeah. Punish someone for doing what you wanted them to do in the first place. Makes a lot of no fucking sense. But the idea that this God made some for heaven and some for hell means you have no free will. You can only be what you were made to be. And in that regard, what's the point of the game? What's the point of any of this? If you want to go by the Christian mindset, I mean, you want to say that atheists and those that don't believe in your Jesus that there's no point. If you believe this shit, it becomes what's the fucking point? Because if your God already knows the outcome, what the fuck are we going through this for? There is also the second place that I'm going to be quoting is Ephesians chapter 1 verse 5. having predestined us unto the adoption of children by Jesus Christ to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will. Not everyone would have been predestinated for that. Those that weren't are screwed. When you have the aspect of predestination and chosen and so forth, many are called, few are chosen, that bullshit. The thing is, if few are chosen, few are getting in. The aspect of called, who gives a fuck? If this God didn't choose you to be there, you're fucked. The third place that I'm going to be mentioning is Revelation chapter 13, verse 8. And all that dwelled upon the earth shall worship him, whose names were not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If your name wasn't written in this book of life before the foundation of the world, then you're screwed. You're going to worship this beast or whatever the fuck. But it wouldn't matter anyway, because you're already, if your name wasn't written in the fucking book before the world began, you were created to go to hell, so what the fuck does it matter? Again, it comes back to, what's the fucking point? Why go through any of this shit? From the Adam all the way through the Bible. What is the point of it all? What's the point of the Jesus coming if this God is going to handpick who's going to heaven and who's going to hell? Why put the Jesus through it? If you're going to create some for heaven, some for hell, you're deciding beforehand who's going where. In a sense, who's going to be tortured, who isn't, just so you can show those that you decide aren't how good and loving you are, because you're not torturing them like the others that you intended to. That's what you made them for. And this is what Christians worship. I really want to get to the point of, what is the point of Christianity? If you're going to say this stuff isn't real, that this isn't the way it is, then your Bible's not true. And you have to rip out Romans chapter 9, verses 21 to 23, Ephesians 1:5, Revelation 13:8, along with countless other places. And if you're going to start dissecting your Bible and ripping parts out because you don't like it, why not toss the whole goddamn thing out? Because the whole goddamn thing is immoral. Even the aspect of free will, to say that you have a choice. Yeah. Put a knife at someone's throat and say, believe or be tortured. Really, you're giving them a choice. It makes me seriously wonder if people actually think. Tossing gasoline on someone and saying, say I'm wonderful, I'm lighting you, I'm throwing a match on you. I'm giving you a choice. Really? Sounds more like blackmail to me. Blackmail, extortion, manipulation, intimidation. But I guess those are good Christian values, aren't they? Can you sense or can you tell my disdain for this? My disgust? Because when I walked away from Christianity at the age of 24, I didn't walk away from the idea of a God. I walked away because I regarded it as evil. I asked myself, could I go along with the torture of somebody else simply because they were born on a different part of the planet? Like somebody in India, being born Buddhist and being raised to believe in Buddhism. And they live their life as a good Buddhist. They don't hurt anyone. They don't steal. They don't do nasty, wicked, vile shit. They just believe Buddhism. Could I go along with them being tortured forever because they didn't believe in Jesus? I realized the answer to that was no. That even if I would be in this heaven and be safe and see that shit, I would have to be, no, cut it. I ain't going along with this. If that's how you are, I ain't supporting it. I'm not behind you. Fuck you. That is what made me realize I can't be a Christian. for good or for ill, at that point, it was, I can't do this. That is a moral decision I don't think people like Gary, ex-G-Man, can do. I don't think he has the balls. Because I think he's too much of a fucking pussy. That he's too much of a, he will say anything, do anything, just so long as he feels he's safe. Fuck what happens to others. I have a bit more honor than that. My balls are a bit bigger than that. I'm not going to sell out my humanity just for the illusion of comfort. Because if something would be willing to torture someone because of not thinking a certain way, how long do you think it'll be before you do something, or before it decides it doesn't like your face? Something like that is so capricious and so schizophrenic that being around it's like living on eggshells. And I grew up around that shit. Having to feel like I had to walk on eggshells with my mom, or she'd verbally tear me apart. And I realized as a child, if my mom's a representation of what the God is like, I couldn't deal with the God either. But I had to go to church until I was 18 and so forth. So I maintained the religion, and I maintained believing in this God, even as a kid, I had major problems. Because I was looking at it as, if my mom is a representation of the God, I can't stand my mom, so what makes me think I would be able to stand this God? The thing was, I didn't walk away from the religion until I was 24. And in hindsight, looking at it, in a sense, I'm glad I spent the 8 years studying the Bible that I did, because it makes me far more dangerous to Christians than someone that would simply have discarded it and said it's fairy tales and never bothered to look into it and didn't educate themselves on what's this really saying. Because when you really get down to what is in the damn book, the sadism, the narcissism, the psychopathic behavior of the God, it's evident. It's there. It's one, nothing can take away from what's there. And to try and cherry pick, I'm sorry, I can't cherry pick that much. I mean, in the military we had to do, to use the term, the cherry pickers with your arms out and so forth. I can't cherry pick enough for the Bible to make it sound good. Because you would literally have to have a Swiss cheese Bible. And at that point, what's the point of having a fucking book? But what's the point of having it at all if the God knows the outcome before it begins? If the God knows the outcome at the beginning, why the fuck have any of it? Have any of the dance? What, to amuse him? To amuse this sadistic God? I don't fucking think so. This is Mr. Good and Kinky, Greg.